Hi, I'm Dave Myrtle with Aquacraft Seafood Innovation. This is where we talk to thought leaders around the seafood sector and key influencers around the world in different functions, all with the goal of growing seafood consumption here in North America. Take that off. That's a little better. Oh, they're fake. Don't worry about it. That's a green screen. Today, we're going to talk to a farmer, and not just any farmer, but the farmer who I consider in this category to be the most progressive, smartest person around, my co-architect and partner of Skuna Bay Salmon, Stewart Hawthorn. And today we talked to him about his recollections in the creation and experience around building Skuna Bay Salmon, how it completely transformed his business, what he thought we did right, what we missed, and why producers around the world today are also failing to embrace this idea of consumer marketing, something that can completely transform their business as well. Today's conversation with Stewart was excellent, brought back a lot of great memories, but it was a lot of great insights on how consumer marketing and brand marketing can transform a producer's business. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Hello, we're here today with Stewart Hawthorn, and this word legend probably gets thrown around a little bit too much, but I guess if in the seafood sector you're not a legend, then I'm not really too sure who would be. You were my partner and co-founder of Skuna Bay Salmon, and so really I'm excited to welcome you here today to get your thoughts on how we can reorient our efforts in the seafood sector around the consumer and towards consumer marketing. Welcome today, Stewart.
Thanks very much. It's great to be here.
So you're calling us here today from New Zealand. Well, and I remember when I first met you in 2011, you had literally just left New Zealand from that position and joined Grieg Seafood as the head of production and managing director with Grieg Seafood British Columbia. And really, as I recall, your main interest was being able to take what you learned observing that New Zealand King Salmon had done very well in the market, really well-developed brands, market strategies, relationships, and with this whole idea that you would apply that to the business here in British Columbia and Canada and Canadian farmed salmon. So maybe tell me a little bit about that.
Certainly in the New Zealand context, there were good solid brands there that helped with the market penetration in the New Zealand market. But in the worldwide market, it was more a unique species play that was being used. And when I came to BC, though, I was really committed to feeling that why is it that people who make trainers can have a massive markup? Why is it that people who make fizzy pop drinks can have a massive markup? Why is it that people who are producing a great quality food, farmers, get very little most of the time? It didn't make sense to me. I thought there must be another way. And so that's why I started in my own time reading about brand development. But I knew I didn't have the skills to do it. And so I needed to get people in the team. And that was where you and I met. And the Skuna Bay story, the rest of that is history, is the same. It's great.
This idea that a farm salmon from British Columbia could exist in a super premium space with its own branding and its own sophisticated strategies. So how was this idea received by the owners when you proposed this strategy?
Skuna Bay brand is owned by Grieg Seafood, and they were very supportive. I think that they were skeptical, very skeptical. I would say that Norwegian producers it's all about cost, but they were willing to invest a relatively small amount of money in trying to, in humoring me, if you like, with this crazy idea that you could actually make salmon something that people absolutely loved, which is something that I already did do. I love being a salmon farmer. And why were people, especially in British Columbia, so against it? It made no sense to me. So how do we start to communicate that better? And really, for me, branding or the Skuna Bay project wasn't just about creating a great customer experience. It was also about giving people in British Columbia something to be proud of, so they would support our industry more.
Well, I remember when we first met and we started talking about the idea, and I was thinking, is this something that can work? Is this something that interests me? And of course, as a marketing person and someone with an enormous amount of sort of commercial brand experience in other categories, of course, to pioneer a completely new direction was incredibly exciting. But I also remember at the time thinking that this was also very much a strategic business objective. We're really not going to be able to compete with Chile and the massive volumes and efficiencies that they can generate. We're not going to be able to compete with Norway on the world scene. We really have to find our own niche. And it's not going to be about managing costs as much as it is about creating some value and some tangible value that you can deliver back to the market and back to customers, but then of course back to the owners and the shareholders themselves.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think there were several prongs, if you like, to what we were doing. Is one was we had to have a commercial enterprise that worked. Commodity salmon farming is a very tough business. Sometimes you make a lot of money because the commodity prices happen to be high, and sometimes you make very little or lose a lot of money because commodity prices are low, and that's a cycle that happens. And I didn't like the feeling of being out of control of our destiny. I felt there should be a way to improve that dynamic. And in the back of the envelope, if you can get 10-20% of your product going out at a super premium pricing, it provides a buffer for when commodity prices are low. And when commodity prices are high, then you don't care, you're making money anyway, so it's great. So that was the kind of business case, if you like. We needed to reduce our exposure to the commodity market and have a proposition that helped us be profitable no matter what the commodity market was doing. So that was a big incentive for the business as a whole. But as I said before, the other incentive for me personally was I felt that the industry was using traditional PR to communicate its story for its what I would call permission to operate, and I just felt this was another way of doing that, giving people something to be proud of from British Columbia that they could love.
Where the brand ended up and how it developed. How closely did that align with what you'd hoped or expected when you had this idea of creating commercial strategies and getting close to the market?
Well, I can't remember the numbers exactly now, but I mean, in terms of the soft objectives, it was absolutely a success. I mean, we took farmed salmon from British Columbia, which, I mean, farmed salmon full stop would never be on a white tablecloth chef's menu, never in North America. It was now suddenly it was back, and it was really like creating a brand new product that chefs had forgotten about, these top chefs. And so that part of it was really successful. I think that we also were very successful with the business side of it. The Skuna Bay brand was very important to Grieg Seafood's bottom line in British Columbia. And so that was a success. And even with the local community, I think we made strides there. We got some great media around being served at the Obama's second inauguration, for example, dinner, which was super. Who wouldn't want that? We were, a salmon supplier to the U.S. Tennis Open. We were supplying and associated with the Kentucky Derby, all these sorts of things. And also with some of the best chefs in North America that were coming to BC, seeing what was happening on the farms for themselves. It was just a super result, really, in terms of all of those things.
Do you think there's growth for these branded strategies moving forward?
I think there has to be growth. Having a low-cost, high-value product, I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. We spent our money on marketing the fish that sold as Skuna Bay. So we added cost on those fish, not on every fish that we farmed. We spent money on where we added value in the processing plant and at point of harvest. Again, mostly focused on just the fish that were being sold as Skuna Bay. We spent money on packaging that was better quality, recyclable, those types of things. So I think trying to think about what was important to the chef, or in this case, our customer, the white tablecloth chef, and then trying to find the things that ticked all their boxes was what made it successful for us.
I think we did an enormous amount of research, and probably obviously the most important was this qualitative research we did with chefs. When I talked to other producers about this idea of consumer marketing and embracing sophisticated strategies in the marketplace, and there's a lot of yeah, makes a lot of sense, and then I will say, and we've got to do some research. We've got to find out what the consumer wants, thinks about, what their motivations are, how it applies to what your assets are. And that's when I get this blank look. So what do you think about this, the role of research and just collecting data and insights?
But I mean, I don't think that we would have been successful because I had my own ideas about what I thought was important. And it wasn't until we got that objective information that we could then really work on things that were important to the chef. So what I remember about some of that research was, what did the chef think? He thought farmed salmon was inferior. He thought it was almost a dirty word, these top chefs. So our insight to that was, okay, so we need to have a perfect fish every single time. So how do we do that? And we could then turn to our farming team and say, guys, what can we do to make these fish perfect? And that was a good conversation for all the fish that we were farming, not just the Skuna Bay fish. So there was a glow effect, if you like, a positive thing for the whole business. The chefs thought we were a big industrial machine. That's what they thought salmon farm was industrial. And so we said, okay, well, that's not how we feel about it. So let's introduce it to some of the farmers. And we made those connections through the farming team. The other thing that was quite interesting to me through that process was chefs thought that all the fish they get in their restaurant every day is like 12 hours since it was caught, which of course we knew was nonsense. There's no fish is 12 hours old when it gets into even the best restaurants in America. But what we did do is we changed the way of distribution in partnership with our distributors by never letting anyone else touch that fish after it was put in its special recyclable box. And that created I think that was important. It really created a trust between us and the chef directly, in partnership, not excluding, not going around our distributor, but in partnership with the distributor. And so for this particular market and these particular customers, those are some of the important things. And I think we just went about addressing them. You could only do that by having a research that told you that's what people thought. If we hadn't had that research, then we probably would have produced something that people didn't want.
And what were some perceptions, entered the process with, and then after reviewing the research, surprised you or changed your perception?
Probably the biggest insight for me was something that you said quite early on to me, was that it has to be real. I thought we could just tell the story. Salmon farming is great, trust me, and that people would then buy into that. But probably the number one thing was that chefs wanted a great quality product, and that insight came through really strong. So then we had to come up with a way of delivering that, and we had this very comprehensive selection method. We had a super detailed cleaning method. We had special packaging, all these types of things to help. All of it focused on helping improve the quality, so that the chef always got what they were expecting. And the thing that made me think, oh, we've got this right, was when chefs, when I was going around North America meeting them, started saying things like, I used to meet every single seafood shipment. I personally would meet it because I didn't trust that it would be what I was told. It was unreliable. But after 3 or 4 shipments of Skuna Bay, they never bothered looking for the Skuna Bay fish. They never took it out of the box. They left it in the box because they knew it would always be perfect.
One of the things that at the time I recall, there was a lot of talk about sustainability, having to defend one's sustainability attributes, this idea that if you're going to build a brand, it has to be around sustainability. And the research didn't really bear that out. The research said that was a business license. It's assumed you're going to be sustainable, but what we really wanted was about your quality and know the people that are rearing these animals. I mean, what is your thoughts, your recollection on the role of sustainability?
Yeah, I agree completely with that. I mean, the chefs, it was like table stakes. You had to have some sort of environmental endorsement, which was, unfairly tough to get for salmon farmers. But we did get it. We worked in partnership initially with best aquaculture practices, and they were really very supportive and very good. They really believed in farming the oceans rather than just catching fish. I mean, the chefs, they didn't. It's not that they didn't care about sustainability; they did care about it, but they didn't. It wasn't the number one buying criteria. You're right. They assumed that their distributors, who were their trusted distributors, were bringing good quality fish to them that was sustainable. That was, they kind of used the distributor to help them decide and trust them that they were taking care of that.
Well, and I remember when we embarked on the process, you both, sort of during the development stage as well as when we hit the road and actually hit the market. And I mean, I was incredibly passionate and excited, and I believe strongly in what we were doing. But I recall there hardly being any support, at least within the industry, and a lot of people thinking this is going to go nowhere, and this is crazy. Do you recall what was the sort of level of support among your peers and colleagues at the time?
Well, I think even to this day, a lot of my salmon farming colleagues, and by that I just mean the big companies really, who focus mostly on production and cost, they still think it was just some flim-flam story. They didn't realize that these fish were genuinely better. They didn't accept that. They just said, no, you're farming them the same, it's just the same. And it just wasn't true. It was true that a lot of the farming process was similar, but the care we took from point of harvest through processing, selection, packaging, and then not just that, but also from when it left the factory, the processing plant, to get to the end customer, the box never allowed to be opened by anyone except for the end chef. All these things made a big difference to the quality of that fish when it arrived at the restaurant. And so we actually did have a genuinely better product, and that is why it's so. So there's a lot of skepticism with my colleagues, for sure.
The distributor community, and especially our distributor partners, I think they looked on what we were doing not just as different and unique, but that we were doing it well and professionally. We also supported what we said we did. So we went in and said we'd give them exclusivity and work with them and support them. And lo and behold, after 5 or more years, we were still doing that.
In the end, our distributor strategy was to pick the best distributor we could identify who would buy in and would support us, and then we would support them with people on the ground to go and see chefs in their patch and not allow a sort of a free-for-all for, most seafood suppliers, just want to get to as many distributors as they can. They think that's the way to penetrate the market and sell lots of fish. We didn't think that way. We went the opposite way. We said, no, we want a small number of the best distributors. And it soon became a badge of honor to have Skuna Bay in your portfolio. I remember at one Boston Seafood Show, probably year 2 or thereabouts, we were sitting down with one of the top sort of seafood distributors in North America, and they said, you and I we were drilling them on, can you do this? Can you do that? What's your sales strategy? How many sales reps do you have? How quickly can it get from you to the chef? What's your cold chain like? And they were going, the CEO turned to his head buyer and he sort of said, we are meant to be asking these guys the questions, what's going on here? And again, that made me super excited. It made me think, okay, this is the right way around. We've got a great product. We're super proud of it. It's going to go well, and they wanted it, and it was.
And I also think I look back at Skuna Bay that it just felt like there were so many stakeholders that felt they were contributing to the success of the brand. The brand itself was about the craftsman farmer, so it was literally about the people out there on the farms, all day, every day, looking after these animals. And then, a massive part of the story and the brand was the processing partner, these people that were hand cleaning the fish and selecting it, according to a criteria. And then, even the people driving the trucks, and of course the distributor partner, and the chefs were a critical part. Of course, that was our customer, but they also were an important part of the story. So I kind of look back and feel like that was also an important part, was just getting this sort of large group of stakeholders feeling like they were all sort of contributing in some way to the success of the brand.
I mean, I would say as well, I mean, it was a two-way street though. So our farmers, us guys in BC out there feeding the fish every day, out in the rubbishy weather, sometimes beautiful weather too, of course, but actually raising these fish and looking after these fish, they got such a buzz from meeting these great chefs when the great chefs came up to BC. While we were giving to the chefs, if you like, we were also getting back this validation of what we were doing, which was super important to the team, that we weren't just talking about cost. We were talking about value and quality, and the farming team really, really enjoyed that.
And what do you think were the most important parts of the brand? And I'll list a bunch. I mean, was it the excellent, consistent quality? Was it the connection with the person out there on the farm, rearing the animals? Was it solid sustainability story? Was it the unique inspection and selection and hand cleaning process? Was it this amazing recyclable box that no one else was using that worked great? And was it the great marketing story, this sort of professionally told, beautiful, compelling story with beautiful imagery? Was it the distributor strategy? Was it our people out on the street? I mean, what are those things are the important things?
Well, I don't think you can separate any of them. So for our particular story, or our particular brand with our particular customers, all of those things were important. Some of them were table stakes. Sustainability, I think that was, you just had to have it. But without all of these things being linked together in a compelling way, it wouldn't have been as successful as it was. I think a lot of the traditional salmon farming industry thinks of a brand almost as a bad word. They feel it's like tricking people. And I don't feel that. I feel it's about communicating. It's about trust, and it's about your values. And I think that's what, so the things you listed there, quality, connection with the farmer, sustainability, selection process, packaging, distributor strategy, all those things together were about building a connection, building trust with that end purchaser, people who actually used the product, which was the chef.
Well, I love to hear that, because this is what I argue all the time. And I've had these conversations with producers where they say, well, do we really need the unique box? Or maybe we really don't need to conduct research. Can we not just do a nice website and redo the logo? And we'll hire people out on the street. And I just believe that, you can take as many shortcuts as you want. But I also think all of those things are important. And if you're not willing to do them, somebody will be willing to do them and do a better job than you are at getting this customer's business. I left Skuna Bay to start up my own business at this time. And I sort of expected, we had this incredible run of success with Skuna Bay and enormous business success. We were contributing millions of dollars to the company's bottom line, to the owners. So I'm wondering, why do you think that there isn't this same level of interest, in this strategy, when there's an example of something that worked real well?
I don't know is the short answer, but I think the reality is that in the salmon sector, at least, is that the industry is based out of countries that produce an awful lot of fish, and they just think about getting it out the door, and they leave the branding up to middle people, if any, and they've got less interest in that part of the market story, and less experience in it, and they're making good money. So why would they need that type of strategy? but the real competition for salmon isn't actually the other salmon, it's other fish and it's other proteins, beef, chicken, pork in particular. And how do we grow that? There's an awful lot of, it's a much bigger pie out there if we want to go and create it. And I do think, as you said earlier, that having that partnership approach with big retailers, routine promotions like they do with beef, chicken, pork, lamb, is the way to create more demand for your product.
And you've stayed in this sector with owning and establishing and owning an equipment company for the aquaculture space, and now you're starting up your own salmon farm in Scotland. So I would assume that you're bullish on the seafood sector.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, seafood ticks an awful lot of boxes. Good for people's health. It's got a small CO2 footprint in terms of production, the smallest of any animal protein. And so I see a very strong future in the decades ahead. And I think there'll be more and more demand for it. And the industry's challenge will be to produce it.
If you were going to do this all over again, run a salmon operation, what would you do differently? Would you embrace similar strategies? But you're about to do that very thing. So I guess I can ask you, will you adopt both?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's early days yet for this Loch Long Salmon company that I'm a partner in. But for sure, we will want to communicate what we are doing to our end customer. We have done no work yet on defining who our end customer is, what market segment we exactly want to focus on, and how we want to go about doing that. But, with Loch Long Salmon, we'll be using different types of farming technology, and for sure we want to advantage that. And will it be a similar strategy to Skuna Bay? The short answer, I don't know yet. We haven't done the research. We need to do the research, and then we can decide.
What are your thoughts on the role of consumer marketing and brand marketing in the seafood sector?
I think that I think that marketing is super important, to getting rewarded for what you do, to being allowed to keep doing it, and to make sure that the farmer gets recognized for this super important role that they have. Right now, the farmers often cut out of the value that is created by seafood in general and salmon in particular, and we should be, as farmers, we should be at the table saying, hey, we're super proud of what we do and we should be rewarded for it.
So last question. So any last thoughts
Or experiences you wanted to share thinking about Skuna Bay?
Well, I mean, when I first went to BC, I saw Skuna Bay almost more as a defense to help us win the hearts and minds of the communities in BC. And it helped with that. But it did so much more. It created a buzz within our team. People loved being the farmers of Skuna Bay Salmon. It allowed the farming team's focus to change from being, focused on cost to be focused on value. Cost was always maintained a very important part of the process as well, of course. But most of all, it was a lot of fun. We got to meet these really interesting people, these chefs who were so passionate about what they did. I remember one of the first ones we did where the chef picked this salmon up out of the ice. He dug his fingers into the ice and picked it out, and he just went, wow, that's the best fish I have ever seen. It wasn't the best salmon he'd ever seen, it was the best fish he'd ever seen. And I still get tingles down my spine talking about that. It was so much fun. And I would just say to people that if you're proud of what you do, shouldn't you be telling people about that and getting rewarded for that?
It's been great to talk to you from all the way across the world, even amidst this challenging pandemic we're dealing with. But it's been a really great conversation. Of course, talking to someone who's an expert in the category, being my partner and co-founder of Skuna Bay Salmon. Thanks, Stewart.
Great. Thank you very much, Dave. Nice seeing you again.